in Welcome. Thank you for being here. We are going to get started very soon. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Gitanshi, and I am one of the Longmore Fellows working at the Disability Cultural Center. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so grateful to have Tiffany Yu and Haben Girma with us for this important event centering Tiffany's new book, The Anti-Ableist Manifesto, Smashing Stereotypes, Forging Change, and Building a Disability Inclusive World. Today's program is a Zoom webinar, so it's a bit like you're watching a TV show with our guests today. But if you'd like to chat further, we have a Q&A space that you can use for questions and also just to share reactions and comments. I'll be reading out the questions near the end of the event. If you'd like to access that space after the event, please email access@disabilityculturalcenter.org. This link will be in the chat. This program is presented to you today by the San Francisco Disability Cultural Center, a collaboration led by LC and Lily Cox Haven of Hope, with support from Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability at San Francisco State University. All made possible thanks to financial contributions from the City of San Francisco's Human Services Agency's Department of Disability and Aging Services. Today's event is also co-sponsored by the Ruby, a community and collective of women, trans feminine, and non-binary artists and writers based in San Francisco's Mission District. Now, on to the event. It is an incredible honor for me to introduce to you Haben Girma, a disability rights lawyer and advocate, who is actually the one who recommended this book while we were tabling at Stacy Fest earlier this year and was the reason I picked it up. She will be moderating the conversation with Tiffany Yu. Once again, we are so grateful for you both for being with us today. Haben, I'll pass it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. So my name is Haben Girma. I'm deafblind, so I am not seeing and hearing the content of this conversation, but I will have access through Braille. So I have two Braille displays in front of me. One I'm using for communication. The other one, I have my list of questions. Another way we are adapting this conversation is we're asking people to be patient with different communication styles. We all have different communication styles and processing speeds. So you will notice a delay between when I speak and when others speak. And that's part of accessibility, patience. And when one is finished with their part of the conversation, it's helpful for me to receive a signal like, go ahead, back to you. So it's clear that someone is still thinking or they're done with their part of the conversation. This conversation is centering accessibility, and we can make our world more accessible by reading the Anti-Ableist Manifesto by Tiffany Yu. One of the things I love about this book is that it's linguistically accessible. It's very easy to read, both for beginners to disability advocacy and for people who are experienced and have been doing this for years. There's still so much wisdom for us to learn. So this conversation is a combination of intro information and advanced informations for anti-ableist activists. And Tiffany Yu is here with us today and is going to tell us about her book. She is a disability advocate, a creator. She has lots of amazing content on Instagram, TikTok, and several other social media channels. And a lot of her personal stories are woven in through the book, in addition to stories from other disability advocates. So you are getting many different experiences as you read the book. And before I ask my first question, I will share a visual description. It's an accessibility practice that helps ensure individuals who are blind or accessing content non-visually still get access to the information. I'm a Black woman wearing a shirt that says commit to inclusion. And I share that I have Braille computers in front of me as part of my accessibility. Now I want to ask if Tiffany, you can introduce yourself, including a visual description.
Thank you so much, Haben, and it is so great to be back in community with you. Before we started recording, we were reminiscing about how I actually moderated a book chat with Haben when her book came out in 2019. So in many ways, this feels like a full circle moment. In addition to that, I had the honor of serving on the leadership planning committee for the San Francisco Disability Cultural Center back in 2018. So many full circle moments happening here. In terms of a brief visual description, again, my name is Tiffany Yu. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a Taiwanese American woman with pretty long black hair now. It's grown out, wearing a blue top, and I'm sitting next to a table with a hardcover copy of the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, which has this gradient orange cover next to a bouquet of flowers that are red and white for the holiday. And I'm joining you from Los Angeles, my place in Los Angeles, which is where I live now. And one thing I also want to add is I was very excited to be able to share a lot of my own stories within this book. I also had the honor of getting to include some of Haben's stories in the book as well. And as I was getting ready for the book to come out into the world, Haben also so graciously endorsed the book, which appears on the back cover of the book as well. And she texted me yesterday that she has now read the book twice. So hopefully new things that you can learn every single time you read it. So I'll hand it back over to you, Haben.
Thank you, Tiffany. I love how you have us go on your journey with you from discovering disability to getting to a point of disability pride. That is a different journey for every person. People take different paths and different lengths of time to get to the point of disability pride. I'm wondering, can you share with us, how did you get to disability pride? And I know a big part of that is dealing with internalized ableism. How do you manage internalized ableism? Back to you.
Such a good question. So I thought I would start out by just sharing the definition of internalized ableism, if that's a concept that is new to our participants here. So and I'm going to read this from the book. It says, living in an ableist world also creates internalized ableism, a form of internalized oppression. Internalized oppression is defined as the internalization of negative messages and beliefs about oneself and one's group that are perpetuated by a society or system that oppresses them. It can manifest as self-hatred, low self-esteem, self-doubt, and a lack of self-worth, and can lead to individuals internalizing negative stereotypes and biases about their own group and accepting the dominant narrative about their own worth and value. It can be a significant barrier to self-empowerment and the ability to challenge and resist oppression. And so I wanted to start out with that because I know Haben and I both very much live in this concept of disability pride, which to me is around how can we assert our value and worth in a society that reminds us that we should feel shame about who we are. For me, I think unlearning a lot of that actually came through the creation of a community that I started, but also finding other disabled people. And I actually do believe that part of the way that ableism gets more power is by making us think that we are isolated or intentionally isolating us and making us feel lonely and more excluded. And once we start to find each other, we realize we have power in community, in solidarity with each other. So one thing I didn't actually get to talk about that much in the book is what I call disability origin stories. And I believe that many of us who have found disability pride or who are doing the work to unlearn their own internalized ableism have a second disability origin story. So for me, my first disability origin story was me acquiring my disability at 9 years old in a car accident. But my second disability origin story is when I discovered this incredible thing called disability culture. I found disability community, and through that, I also found disability pride. I also want to acknowledge that there are some people in the disability community who may never reach that second disability origin story or may never become proud of their disabilities because of society's messaging and a lot of it that reminds us that we should be hidden away. And in addition to that, for those of us, so I live with both apparent and non-apparent disabilities. So I have a paralyzed arm, which is visible and apparent. And I also live with PTSD, which is a mental health disability. And internalized ableism also continues to get more power for those of us who live with non-apparent disabilities because we have, in some ways, I don't know if the right word is to call it a privilege, but in some ways we can choose how much we can choose how we want to show up. And a lot of us who have non-apparent disabilities decide to cover or mask because, again, we may feel internalized shame or this internalized oppression around having our bodies and our minds work a little bit differently. But that was a long-winded answer to say, actually finding a disability community and meeting other disabled people has been so instrumental in my own journey of being proud of not only who I am as a disabled person, but being proud of the disability community as a whole. And I'll hand it back over to you, Haben.
I completely agree about the need to have community and help us move along our journey through the creation of our community. A barrier to that is all the negativity, that ableism that comes in many forms. The sneaky ones are microaggressions, where people are sometimes making comments they think are sweet or kind, but are actually tearing us down. And as we're finding community, sometimes we run into that, and it makes it difficult to find our community when we're facing microaggressions in so many places. Can you share some examples of microaggressions?
I feel like we could have we could fill an entire hour talking about microaggressions. And so I think I'll just share a couple of the most common ones that show up within the disability community. And I do cite, so one thing I really liked about this book is I felt like I wanted to make it like written during this social media era that we're in. So sometimes I'll cite LinkedIn posts or TikToks or Instagrams that I find because we're all learning and educating and we're all doing this together. And so I actually mentioned a LinkedIn post from someone named Becca Lori Hector, and she summarizes some of the biggest microaggressions that disabled people face. And they fit into these three categories. These four categories. The first is patronization. It's telling a disabled person that they are inspiring simply by existing. And one thing that I love Haben has said in the past is that while we can't force someone about how they feel when they encountered a disabled person, we can encourage them to figure out some action that they will take. But a lot of us who have disabilities are called inspiring for simply existing. We are inspiring for checking the mail in the morning, or going to the grocery store, or having a job, or wanting to have a desire to be in a romantic relationship. So it's the patronization of just assuming that anything that we do seems exceptional, even though many of us are extraordinarily ordinary and human. The second is called infantilization. Again, it's setting the barrier so low for disabled people that, and I have the phrase here, let me just do it for you. It is offering help or intruding yourself into a situation when it looks like a disabled person may need some assistance, but it only looks like that because the way we do things may look totally different than how you do it. And I share this example in the book of I'm someone who travels a lot, and I carry around luggage that has wheels, and wheels only happen to have, luggage only happen to have wheels on them as a result of airports becoming wheelchair accessible. So that's that's an example of some inclusive design. But I wheel my luggage around, and on a train one time, the luggage storage area was nestled underneath the seats. And so I went and I tilted my luggage over with my one arm, and I was just about to go and orient it underneath the seats into the storage area when someone shoved me out of the way, shoved my luggage underneath the seats, turned to me and said, "You should really ask for help." And that was an experience where and I wanted to share that because it's an everyday experience for those of us who have more apparent disabilities. I mean, I have a feeling that Haben may even have experiences of being touched without her consent, you know. So that's the second, infantilization. And then the third is denial of personal identity. That would be telling someone, I can't believe you're married and have kids. Again, it's setting the bar so low for disabled people that you are just surprised that they have a job, or that they wrote a book, or that they are on the Zoom call, or that they want to learn about unlearning internalized ableism. And then the final is the denial of disability experience. So that's saying something like, hey, we're all a little bit disabled. Or one microaggression I get a lot when I show up in corporate spaces is people will tell me, oh, I don't think of you as disabled. Again, it's kind of the erasure of our disability experience. But I actually think where microaggressions show up the worst is not even being thought about in the first place. So it's me showing up to an event like this and assuming that no disabled people will attend who could benefit from captions or ASL interpreters or access to the recording later. Or even, as Haben mentioned in the beginning, just the patience that some of us take a little bit more time to respond or may process things in a different way. And actually, Haben, I'm sure, I don't know if there are any microaggressions you would want to add.
So many. It's just like you said, we could go on for days making a list. Um, in your book, you mentioned the phrase lateral ableism. And the example was of how sometimes in the disability community, so among disabled people, we might say, oh, at least we don't have X disability. And we list a disability that is considered more severe than the disability we have. That's another kind of, tearing disabled people down, microaggression, which falls under the many forms of ableism. So ableism can be language, it can be insults disguised as compliments, it's physical barriers, digital barriers, so many different forms. But I'm going to change gears. We know ableism exists and it's stressful and painful and deadly. We need more people to help. And you shared the example of the person on the train who thought they were helping, but were actually being rude and disrespectful of your space and your right to decide what to do with your own luggage. Can you share, how do you want allies to help? What is a respectful way to offer help? Go ahead.
There's a statement that I love, and the statement is, let me know if you need any support. And what I love about that statement is for those of us who have more apparent disabilities, being offered help almost becomes a microaggression for some of us because people just assume that we need help all of the time. What I like about this statement, let me know if you need any support, and you can adapt it whatever works in your own way. It can be, let me know if you need any assistance. But with a statement, it's a proactive way to let someone know that you're there, but they don't have to engage with you if they don't want to. And a lot of times we as disabled people get so many, not only offers for help, but intrusive questions about our disabilities. And when something is posed as a question, we as disabled people almost feel a little bit of pressure to engage. And some days we just don't want to. And so I love the statement, let me know if you need any support. So if it turns out that a person comes back to you and they let you know that they would appreciate your assistance, there's a step 2, which is to ask specifically how you can help, rather than making your own assumptions of what they might need in that specific scenario. I will also share that around this particular topic of offering assistance and receiving it, I remember a couple of years ago sharing that networking, conference, sit down lunches, or meals were always really anxiety inducing for me because as someone who can only use one arm, I wasn't sure how to tear off a piece of bread from the bread basket or pass around a large platter and serve myself while holding that platter, or even cutting a main course of meat of some sort. And I went to a conference a couple of years ago where the server saw that I was wearing a wrist splint. Sometimes on my injured arm, I wear a wrist splint. And he asked if I needed any assistance. And in that scenario, I said yes. He went to the back, grabbed some cutting tools, and came back and cut my dish. And I actually filmed the cut dish, and I said thank you to the server at this hotel. And the comments on the post were actually really interesting. There were 2 types of comments. One type of comment were from potentially well-intentioned people who said, well, you should have just asked for help in the first place. You should be the one who is proactive in asking for what you need. Again, some of us aren't sure with our level of situational awareness of having to do that, and sometimes we feel like a burden for navigating our own access or advocating for it. And then the other comments were from other disabled people who told me that during any conference meals or any sit down meals like that, they actually just go back to their hotel room and eat an energy bar, or they will opt out because of all of the different pieces of access that they have to navigate and negotiate in that scenario. So it just reminded me that, we always say that once you've met one disabled person, you've met one disabled person. Our community is not a monolith. You will meet people who will tell you, hey, I have no problem if people want to offer me help at any time. You will have other people who may get offended if you do offer them help. In that case, I think just use the statement. Let me know if you need any support. If they decline your offer, just respect those boundaries. Back over to you, Haben.
I really appreciate that story because food is a big part of my life. I love food, and I'm always finding ways to accommodate myself, self accommodation, or finding spaces that are accessible so that I could have access to food. And when there's staff who actually care about making their spaces accessible and they ask how we can make this more accessible, it's such a relief. It gives you the opportunity to enjoy a meal without having to stress and think about one more barrier. Many people on this call have probably witnessed barriers. Maybe you've witnessed someone offering help in a way that's disrespectful, or you've noticed people commenting online in ways that are ableist. What should allies do when they notice microaggressions or ableism in other forms happening around them? Back to you.
You'll notice that I provide a lot of scripts throughout the book because when I first started doing this work, we would go out and we would say, don't do this, don't do that. And a lot of people would come back to me and they said, well, you told me all of these things that I shouldn't do. I don't even know what to do. So a couple of things that you can do. I talk about the concept of calling in versus calling out. Calling out is kind of interrupting a scenario right then and there, kind of in public. Calling in is potentially pulling someone aside that you may have an existing relationship with to let them know the impact of something they may have done, and potentially provide some repair about how you can move forward. There is a time and place for both of those, calling in versus calling out. You will see that in a calling out scenario, we see this a lot happening with public shaming of maybe public elected officials. Shame will create action sometimes, but in my view, it will create a one-time action that doesn't create the type of meaningful change that I'm hoping we look for, or I'm hoping we strive for. Calling someone in, rather, what that does is it continues to deepen the relationship. And if, again, there is an existing relationship there, having an ongoing conversation with that person about how we are imperfectly trying to learn and figure out how to show up better for each other. So 2 scripts I like. If you do happen to witness some microaggression happening, Haben mentioned in online spaces, either responding in a comment or DMing, sending a direct message to that person to say, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up that this language that you used might be offensive to some people in the disability community. Here are some alternatives that you can use instead. You could also even ask the person, hey, I'm not sure if you were aware, but this may be interpreted this way by certain people within the disability community. What were you really trying to say? And is there alternative language that you can use instead? If you have an inkling and are trying to do some of this unlearning work on your own, I actually have been referring people over to ChatGPT or any AI-based tool where you can put in, hey, I was thinking of publishing this caption and maybe I've used a phrase like the blind leading the blind, or I was paralyzed by fear. I'm afraid, and this is the prompt you can type into ChatGPT. I have a feeling this may be, or do you think that this may be offensive to people, certain people in the disability community? And can you suggest some alternative phrases to use instead? And I will also share that even in the process of writing the book, I know I provide a couple tables in there around inclusive language, outdated language around disability, and some updated language to use instead. And as I was going through, I actually found that sometimes some of the updated alternatives I had provided had ableist undertones to them as well. And so all of that to say, I have always believed that learning should never be about shame. I don't want to shame people into caring about the disability community. I don't want to shame people into showing up for us. But I do believe that through intimacy and building connections and building relationships and genuine relationships with us, um, I have found many of my friends start to show up for me and the communities that I care about. Back over to you, Haben.
A lot of people need examples of what they should be doing, what they should be saying to help guide them. And I really appreciate how there are examples and scripts in the Anti-Ableist Manifesto. So one of the examples is by, so we have examples from individuals, from employers, friends, readers, and I want to shift over to companies. What are examples of companies making anti-ableist choices that lift up our disability community? Back to you.
I feel like this one could also be an entire session, but I guess I share a couple examples of the book that are centered around this stat that I came across a couple of years ago about how 76 to 80% of disabled employees are not transparent about their disabilities at work. So that's 4 out of 5 disabled employees not feeling a level of psychological safety in their workspaces to be transparent about their disabilities, and as a result, advocate for the things that they need. So the top 2 examples are number 1, accessibility, and number 2, accommodations. I share both of those because they're different. So accessibility is we've thought about all of the different types of bodies and our minds that will engage with this space and have tried to incorporate access from the start. I call this building an accessibility first culture where, and I use this phrase in the book, I would love to build what I call an I would benefit from blank culture. So that means that we can show up to a space and I can say, I would benefit from noise canceling headphones, or I would benefit from notes from this meeting. I would benefit from an agenda for the meeting. And no matter who you are, uh, that type of access is standard within that company, that nobody is thinking anything from people saying the things that they would benefit from. Number 2 is accommodations, which says we have failed to think about access in a certain way in this space. So we are going to put a bandage on in order for this person to participate equitably. I didn't get to include this in the book because I feel like I have new ideas coming up every day, but accommodations to me actually feel like a form of inclusive design, which says that we want to create a desired outcome, which is getting your work done. We just may have multiple design variations of getting there, which in my view are accommodations. Both accessibility and accommodations promote equity. And part of why I wanted to spend time talking about both of those, even though I have a feeling that the majority of people here have heard of them, is that the number one issue that many, in talking to law firms that work around disability employment and disability rights, a lot of them will tell me that the number one issue they deal with is someone not getting reasonable accommodations. So I think that there are a lot of misconceptions around them about them being high tech or very expensive, but actually almost everything that I named in the I would benefit from costs very little or is a one-time cost. But in addition to that, I also share, and this is just top of mind because I spent time with them recently, was an example of a large retailer who recently implemented sensory-friendly hours in all of their stores. And it started out as a pilot where in partnership with the disability community, they spoke with different customers about what would make the shopping experience more accessible. So part of that was dimming the lights, turning, instead of the TVs showing moving images, they would have static images and turning off the music. And the pilot actually did so well that they ended up implementing it in all of their stores. So I think I just wanted to share that we are here, the disability community is here as partners, compensated, to work with you to try to make your spaces more accessible for all of us. Um, but but yeah, I think I Oh, and actually, sorry, I'm just looking at the notes here. In addition to that, I actually had the opportunity. There's a lot of movement happening in the fashion space right now around making things more adaptive or functional. And I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to be a part of a large fashion brand launching their accessible line. And the piece that I wore was this oversized hot pink blazer that instead of the buttons buttoning the blazer, they were magnets. And after I shared a photo of of after I shared a photo of the blazer online, so many of my friends were going to buy the blazer, both who had disabilities who could benefit from magnets instead of buttons, um, but also people within the disability community. And it also just showed me too that we're not just looking for something that's functional, we're looking for something that is fashionable as well. And I'd like to believe, and Haben, I'm curious your views on this. I have lived with my disability for almost 30 years. And I started the community that I now run, Diversability, 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, I would mention the phrase disability pride, and I would get very strange looks from people because they had a really hard time understanding how anyone could be proud to be disabled. And now in 2024, I feel like we're on the cusp of a cultural shift around disability where we're seeing more companies, big retailers want to make their stores more accessible. Fashion brands want to unlock this, whether you call it a 13 trillion or an $18 trillion global market around disability. Even me having a book come out, and I have so many disabled friends, and Haben paved the way for a lot of this, having so many other disabled friends who have books that have come out either this year or in the next year, a lot of interest in wanting to learn more about our experiences. So I'll hand it back over to you, Haben.
I've also gotten people giving me concerned reactions when I talk about disability pride. And one of the responses is disability, the word DIS is in there, and that's inherently negative, right? But in your book, you offered a great response. Not always. Sometimes this is actually for something positive, as in distinct, distinguished, discuss. So it is up to us to decide how we want to frame the word disability. We can make it negative, we can make it positive, or we can make it neutral, just another part of the human experience. And disability pride, for me, for Tiffany and others, is a way to create a bridge with other disabled people, especially when we travel and go to new places. We can use the word disability as a quick shortcut through Google searches or hashtag searches on social media to find other like-minded advocates who share our value of equality for disabled people. We have a lot of allies, experienced allies, new allies joining us here. And you've shared what large corporations and employers can do to support disability inclusion. But what about individuals? What can individuals do to show up for our community? I really liked your story about City Hall, so maybe you could share some of that. Go for it.
Sure, thanks, Haben. And I guess I will use this moment to introduce you to the Anti-Ableist Manifesto art. And I'm holding up a postcard of the art, which has almost 30 statements on it that are in bold print in different fonts. And the statements include things like disability is not a bad word or a bad thing, disability is intersectional, don't erase history. And these are inspired by chapters in the book. And I would often get the question from people along this journey and from allies wondering, what's one thing I can do to show up better for the disability community? And depending on who you are, the answer may be different, right? So we spent time talking about what companies can do. One story I shared in the book was about my own journey into getting more civically engaged. And it actually all just started with me doing an online search for disability commission and then your city, enter your city. At that time, I was living in San Francisco. And I had just newly moved to San Francisco. And honestly, all I really wanted to do was figure out what was going on from a disability perspective. So I started showing up at meetings, and there's something during every commission meeting called public comment, where they give you about 2 to 3 minutes to either comment on something that they're discussing at the agenda, or I've even gone to commission meetings sometimes just to introduce myself, just to say, hey, my name is Tiffany Yu. I just moved to San Francisco. This is the type of disability work that I was doing in the last place I lived in New York. I would love to get more involved with what and learn more about what the commission is doing. Here is my contact information. After a certain after showing up a certain couple of times, one of the council members actually asked if I would serve on the council. In San Francisco, it's called the San Francisco Mayor's Disability Council. And one of the things that I like to think about in terms of anything that we do, from the communities that we want to get involved in or the type of advocacy work that we want to do, is how can you leverage your spheres of influence to make an impact in the spaces that you're in? So one example outside of showing up at City Hall is I'm a proud graduate of Georgetown University. And while I was there, I founded their first ever disability student club. So it was me looking at my environment, looking at what resources I had available to me, and if there was a way that I can make change. Now, as an alumni, there's a lot of activity going on at Georgetown, which is a separate conversation, but they have created something. Actually, they've created a disability cultural center at Georgetown. And that was the result of years of advocacy from another Georgetown alum named Lydia XZ Brown, who during their time as a student did so much advocacy around the creation of a disability cultural center. They graduated in 2014 or 2015, and it wasn't until 2022 or 2023 that that came to fruition. So it's also just realizing that everything that we're doing now is planting the seeds, and we may not see change immediately. I know as a millennial, a lot of the generations above mine saw my generation as a millennial as us wanting immediate gratification. And I've had to learn that many of these things take time. So something I was very proud of during my time on the San Francisco Mayor's Disability Council was we write a lot of letters to the mayor. So again, me thinking about, okay, in that specific sphere of influence, we have access to all the city departments. Is there something that we want to do? And I've seen other commissioners in their cities advocate for anti-ableism training for all of the staff, or making their city sensory friendly, or educating anyone who interacts, any city officials who interact with the public around sensory friendly and what that might look like. So I wrote a letter and was able to get San Francisco July proclaimed as Disability Pride Month in 2020. And I believe this year, for those of you who are also in California, Governor Newsom actually proclaimed the state of California, for the state of California, July as Disability Pride Month. So I'd like to think that we helped plant the seeds as these small cities. But I think the takeaway is that no matter who you are, you do have some you do have some influence. And right now, and I don't know all the details, but you can go online and search for it. But there is something going on right now, I believe, at the federal level to phase out 14C certificates. And 14C certificates, if you are not aware, some employers have them so that they can pay disabled people below minimum wage. This is known as sub-minimum wage. But there is some action happening right now, I believe, with the Department of Labor to phase out these 14C certificates. And I believe there's a period of time over the next couple of weeks that you can make public comment around that. And I'll hand it back over to you, Haben.
One of the many things I really appreciate about your book is that you cover so many different disability experiences. We need more people showing up as allies, and this call is also to the disability community. We need more disabled people thinking about people with different disabilities so that we are lifting up those from different disability experiences. So when you go to your city hall or other local government, speak up, sign, write, and lift up all the different types of disability experiences. So one of the things you could bring up is the disability tax. The disability tax shows up in many different ways. We'll have Tiffany tell us what the disability tax is. Go for it.
Thanks, Haben. I think one thing I also want to add around advocacy, whether it's showing up at City Hall, is that a lot of advocacy is really sharing your own story. And you can't mess it up because it's yours. And hopefully the people that you're speaking with, if it's an issue that you really care about, you sharing it from your own experience as one of their constituents will get them to care about it too and want to make sure that they're advocating for you in the spaces that we don't have access to. But the disability tax, and actually an excerpt from this, if you don't have access to the book, which you can also check out from your local library. But if you don't have access to the book, you can actually read an excerpt of the chapter on the disability tax in The Guardian. And essentially what I talk about is how not only does it cost us more to live for those of us with disabilities, the products that we need also cost us more. So I share an example in the book where I bought a one-handed cutting board during the pandemic, ongoing pandemic. And if you look online for a really nice cutting board, you're maybe paying $30 for it, unless you get a really, really nice one. But the one I got, and I believe that the cheapest one I could find on the market was $75. And it made me think about to cut a cucumber or cut a tomato. It cost me over 100% more to do that same activity. And you know, in the chapter, I talk about how the disability tax includes indirect and indirect costs and financial and non-financial costs as well, such as the emotional burden or the cost of requesting accommodations, especially if there's a lot of admin and paperwork involved with that actually continues to discriminate against people with disabilities who do need accommodations in certain scenarios. But one way to lower the disability tax is by continuing to show up for us and advocate for access so that we don't have to ask for permission to show up. This is a concept that was coined by Mia Mingus called access intimacy, which to me kind of just feels like an exhale. It's showing up, knowing that my access needs are going to be met in that space that I'm in. Also acknowledging that because the disability community is so diverse, we may have access needs that conflict with each other. And how can we find ways to coexist? One example of that, I know I'm digressing a little bit from the disability tax, is there may be some people who benefit from being in a very well-lit space so they can see who is speaking at any one point in time. while at the same time, there may be other people, maybe someone who experiences chronic migraines who would benefit from being in a very low lit or not having any lights on in that particular scenario. That's another example of inclusive design. Again, maybe the situation is participating in a meeting and one person participates and they have their cameras on, and maybe another person participates and they have their camera off, and they're listening to the audio only. Again, multiple design variations, desired outcome is participating in the meeting. But yes, I love the chapter on the disability tax. And I think a lot of the feedback I received, or two pieces of feedback I received, was that a lot of people were not aware of not only how many more expenses we have as disabled people, and this is beyond just medical costs, right? And so part of why I included the example of the cutting board is it's an everyday task that I would like to do. And if even the barrier to entry of doing it is 100% more than someone else, then that's one of the ways that I think that we are counted out. It could be a microaggression. We are counted out of it, where it's saying, oh, well, the market isn't big enough, or you're not going to cut that cucumber by yourself. So even if we try to come up with something, we're going to mark it up so that you can't even buy it in the first place. I'll turn it back over to you, Haben. And I'm recognizing we also only have 8 minutes left, so I don't know if we want to open it up for Q&A. I know there's a lot of good questions coming in, or if you have one more question, and then we'll turn it over to the Q&A.
One more question. I have 20 more questions. So I'm going to let myself stop and give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. So Gitanchi, can you read a question or two from our audience?
Yes, of course. This is Gitanchi. And so the first question I have for you is, do you have suggestions for how to connect folks who may be exploring a disability identity to the disability community?
Such a good question. And I will also share that before I was a disability advocate, I was a community builder first. And I think feeling so isolated and alone in my experience made me want to find community anywhere that I could. So before I go into how to do that, I also just want to share a quick story. So I have a type of spinal cord injury that has resulted in the paralysis of one of my arms, known as a brachial plexus injury. I would show up to I would look up spinal cord spaces, and the majority of people who were there were paraplegic or quadriplegic, and wheelchair users. And in some ways, I didn't feel like I fit there. And then I would show up to limb different spaces because what I have could be considered a limb difference. And the majority of people there were amputees or other types of limb loss, but I still had my whole arm just with a severe nerve injury. And so as a result, I think that there is value in disability specific spaces, but there's also value in what I call cross disability spaces. So if you are looking for a disability community, I know people have certain opinions about Facebook, but Facebook groups are amazing. I actually went on there a couple of years ago and I searched brachial plexus injury, the name of my injury, and I found a Facebook group that my injury happened in 1997. And the first time I found a community specific for people with my injury was in 2020. So that is, if I can do the math quickly in my head, that is over 20 years, almost 25 years for me to find that community. That is a great place to start Facebook groups. You can also, I know a lot of people are using places like Instagram to find each other and build what I would call healthy online relationships with each other. And I have a feeling that before Haben and I met in person, we were probably online friends first. I will also use this as an opportunity for a shameless plug for Diversability, which is the community I started. I know I did see a quick question in the chat around calling our community Diversability. We encourage people to only use Diversability when referring to our organization and not for anything else. And I acknowledge that language is evolving and we may evolve as well, but for now, people know us as Diversability. When in doubt, just use the word disability when referring to disabilities, and disability is not a bad word. But you can join Diversability's community, which also exists as a Facebook group as well. And I will say that, and this probably happens to Haben too, both of us are experts on our own disabilities. And I will probably get an email or someone in my Instagram messages asking me a very specific question. And in some ways, I created Diversability not only as a way for people to find community and find their disability pride or whatever that means for you, but also as a way to exchange resources. Because I may not know specifically about how to apply for disability if you're in New York State, but there may be someone in that community who has resources available for you. And I also just want to add that the Abilities Expo could also be a great resource as well. Even an online search for disability community and your specific city. And one of the things that I'm finding is there is value in meeting in person, but a lot of times these in-person meetups may present certain access barriers for people. And so even in 2020, when Diversability previously had done mainly in-person events in a couple key cities, we saw our own community grow 4 times, which showed me that there is space for virtual communities and starting to build relationships that way. And there are a couple of hashtags that you can search for as well. I like the hashtag disability pride. Amani Barbarin, I think, started the hashtag when I call myself disabled. You can search specific hashtags for your own disability. I know there's a big chronic illness community as well. Haben, how do you find disability community?
I find disability community through online groups like Diversability, through books. I look up books by disabled authors. I read their stories, follow them online. All of you should be following Tiffany Yu. And if not, she is I'm Tiffany Yu. So that's one way to build community online and in person. There are various different disability organizations in our own communities. What's another question?
So we just have time for one more question, and I thought this would be a great one to close us off. And this one's for both of you. Someone said, I really enjoyed reading your book, Tiffany, with lots of examples. Is there a follow-up book coming? And another question asked Haben if she has any new book ideas she's working on as well.
Tiffany, do you want to start first?
Yes, I'm happy to start. One thing I find very fascinating, and I wonder if this is a function of us existing in a productivity capitalist society, is the what's next. And in a lot of my promo for this book, people have been asking what's next. And in some ways, I'm big on having a word for the year. So my word for this year is savor. And for people, we didn't talk that much about the book process, but this entire process of me getting the Anti-Ableist Manifesto out in the world was 3.5 years. And many of you who have picked up the book, it's only been out for 2 months. It's currently on its 3rd printing, which is amazing. I've been so grateful. But it was very, very difficult. I also had a writers community where, in full transparency, I think I was crying almost every single day around how overwhelming it was. I do want to share one access win, though. I did write the entire first draft of the book using speech to text technology. I'm someone who, while I can type with one hand, it does take me, it does put a lot of strain on my one arm to type large amounts of text. And I loved being able to uplift and amplify so many members of the disability community. We hosted our launch event at a disability-owned bookstore. A disabled designer named Jennifer White Johnson created the Anti-Ableist Manifesto art. I share all of that because no, I don't have another book in me right now, but there's so much I wanted to include that and the news cycle is changing so quickly that maybe even some of the issues I brought up in here may hopefully cease to exist in a couple of years. But for right now, I'm just savoring and enjoying just having this book and seeing the reception that it has. And my big dream is, even for the book and for all of my disability advocacy work, is I never wanted it to be the Tiffany show. I wanted it to empower other people in our community to say, hey, Tiffany didn't cover this in her book. Maybe I can go out, maybe you can go out and write that book. Maybe you can, if you didn't agree with something in the book, maybe you can go out and share your opinion about that. And maybe this book will not only empower you to show up at City Hall, but continue to get your voice and your story and your ideas out in the world. Over to you, Haben. Do you have a next book idea?
I love your response. Yes, when we produce amazing work, whether it's a book or an article or a painting, we need time to savor it, to celebrate it. It is a huge accomplishment to finish a book, and there's no rush or even a requirement that you do a second book. I've done one book. I have not done a second book yet. I do entertain ideas of doing a second book, but I'm not going to rush myself. I love the journey of planning and being creative and figuring out the stories to amplify in a book. So I do have book ideas, but there's no timeline, no deadline. But for now, please savor the books we do have. Tiffany Yu's book would be an amazing holiday gift if you're still looking for gifts to share with people. So savor what we do have. And I know that was our last question. Tiffany, do you have any final comments before we close?
I just want to say thank you to Haben for doing this with me. And Haben, I mean, we all love Haben, so I'll just pause it there. And I see, is it Mika came
Yes.
back?
Well, thank you all so much. We've gone a little over, so I'm just doing a very quick closeout, but I want to thank you both so much, and thank you to our Access team. You'll receive a survey in your emails, and look forward to seeing you all at our upcoming events. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.